Hello and welcome to this month's AfOx Digital Insaka. As always, it's a pleasure to have so many of you joining us again from around the world. And to those who are joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome from AfOx. My name is Wachwa Mai, and I'm here to introduce and welcome to this month's AfOx Digital Insaka. As always, it's a pleasure to have. Our first talk today is on African architecture. And I have to say, I'm very excited about the focus of this talk because it underscores the importance of really trying to get under the skin of issues to ensure that the stories we tell about our built cultural heritage reflect our intangible cultures in authentic and helpful ways. The second talk, and for those who have had the chance to follow previous AfOx Digital Insakas, and especially the talks by Alison from the University of Cape Town and Tom from the African Academy of Sciences, this will be familiar territory, but unique. Unique because it's coming directly to us from the University of Ghana, but also because it is a strong testament to research capacity strengthening on the ground, local training of scientists to create strong research ecosystems in Africa. We are delighted to welcome our guest speakers, Ola Uduku and Gordon Awandare. Ola is Professor of Architecture and Joint Head of the Manchester School of Architecture, a unique collaboration between Manchester Metropolitan University and the University of Manchester. She's also the incoming president of the African Studies Association of the UK. Her research is focused on educational architecture in Africa and provision of social infrastructure. She's also involved in developing postgraduate research and teaching links in architecture, heritage, and conservation between West Africa and Northwest England. Gordon is director of the West African Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens at the University of Ghana, where he's also professor of parasitology. His research is on malaria in children. He has received several awards, including the Royal Society Pfizer Award for his achievements in molecular and cellular studies of malaria. Now, just a few pointers for how the session will proceed. As usual, the speakers will each give a 15-minute talk, and it's only after both speakers have completed their presentation will they be able to respond to questions from the audience, which hopefully you will have posted online in the chat box. We will now go straight onto our first talk, Collaborative Partnerships in African Architectural Documentation and Research. Ola.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to this very inspirational African Oxford initiative. I would like to thank the team particularly for setting this up and making sure we knew exactly what we were doing. As I have a 15-minute slot, I'm going to go straight into the presentation. As you can see, I'm going to be talking about African architectural research and how we can look at collaborative partnerships. And what you've got as the first screen image is a picture of myself and Professor Rexford Asase-Opong at the KNUST campus, and a very famous building as far as architects are concerned, which is their original engineering faculty. So just to go on, I'm going to give you a quick movement into what architectural partnerships is, or what architecture is in terms of what we consider. I think for a lot of people, when we think about African architecture, we think about the traditional and the vernacular. In a way, I'm afraid this talks much more about the modern, and then we'll talk about what the future might be in terms of contemporary. The traditional vernacular are the kind of historical architectural records we have of the kingdoms of Benin, the kingdoms of Ashanti, and so on. But what we're really talking about in terms of the research and the documentation is really, I would say, post-World War II architecture, and how we are able to begin to record and document this information. The history we've had in the past is that as mainly post-colonial countries, probably apart from Ethiopia, the colonists at the time were very good at recording the anthropology and the culture, historic culture of Africa, which goes back into the Germanic idea about Africa being a continent that is in the past. From World War II, or just before that, that we had a lot of innovative design by, indeed, the campuses across the African universities were pretty much all designed in the 50s and 60s. So my first photograph, for example. And the challenges we have is really how we identify these new bits of architecture, or relatively new compared to our quite fastidious documentation of the historic and cultural forms. So we have a lot of museums and cultural institutions that will tell you all about the Oba of Benin and so on and so forth. But in terms of looking at the architecture that has been designed since the Second World War, we've got to identify them, locate them, think about how we conserve them, because over time they've begun to lose a lot of their original form and so on. And then we have to be able to be public about this and create the information. So to the second image is of Buckminster Fuller, who was a well-known engineer who actually came to Ghana, to KNUST, to talk with the students about creating different structures. Unfortunately, this structure, which is a geodesic dome, has now been lost. So this kind of thing is what we're trying to be able to conserve. So in this, I'm going to give you 3 quick projects in my 15-minute period that I've been involved in. And I'm trying to, from these projects, discuss and explain how collaboration is absolutely critical to how we're able to begin to identify these projects and bring them into the history of architecture in this case. And we become part of, if you like, a much more global discussion about architecture that is not just the traditional, but also the modern and the contemporary. Generally, modern architecture is considered in the architectural canon from post-World War II right up until the 70s. So this first images of the Alan Vaughan Richards Archive project, which is British Academy funded. I led it with a colleague from South Africa, Hannah LaRue at the bottom left, and the daughter of the architect, Alan Vaughan Richards, Remy Vaughan Richards. Basically, her father had died in the late 80s, left a series of drawings, and they were slowly rotting in his house. The white man in the bottom was the then director of the Goethe Institute in Ghana. Amongst us, we were able to take these drawings, or I was able to take the drawings back to the United Kingdom in the cycle case you can see, and we were able to conserve and digitize most of the drawings. This is the state of the drawings, which shows you the problems we have in Africa. You know, the humidity and so on means they deteriorate. Working with a research assistant, we were able to digitize these drawings. And eventually what we were able to do was to document a number of these drawings, some of which had appeared in architectural journals in the 1960s. In this case, it's Oluwaketon House, and right up to really great details about how the building was actually designed. And interestingly, from a science perspective, this was one of the first buildings that actually had proposed solar collectors, the use of renewable energy and so on. I don't think it was actually implemented in the building, but it ended up as an exhibition, which was attended by a lot of people. In fact, the daughter, Remy Vaughan Richards, had people get in touch with her who had known her father. The exhibition took place in Edinburgh at the end of the period. This was a kind of six-month period I was involved in working on. Second, back to Kumasi again. This was another project where I had worked with Rexford Asase Opong. What we did was to think about how we could document their very striking buildings. From my perspective as a modernist aficionado, it's one of the best campuses, I think, in Africa, if not the world. And again, the buildings are there, but they hadn't really been documented. And again, a bit like the project before, the drawings were in a pretty bad condition. So what we did was to work with the architecture students, but also with high school students at KNUST secondary school, to start looking at the buildings. What was interesting about KNUST was that they actually had a lot of indigenous architects from Ghana and elsewhere, and who were involved in both teaching but also designing some of these buildings. So it was also a knowledge venture in some ways, making the knowledge about these buildings, giving this awareness to everybody. And the students got involved. They looked at plans. So again, from a knowledge perspective, a lot of them had said they had done technical they had technical studies, but they'd never looked at a plan and the relationship between the plan and the building. So it was new for them. And again, at the end, we had a conference. And what you have here, the former heads of school of KNUST, the person at the furthest away, unfortunately, is now deceased. But what we were able to do was to bring these elders to the discussion about what we should be doing about conserving and recording this history. And they gave us really rich oral histories, which we were able to record. And also with a further grant, we were able to do some more photography and documentation of these drawings. So some of these, even if they are going to deteriorate, we do have a digital record. So these are my colleagues from Manchester University, Liverpool University, and the associate head of the archives department, which is part of the library, so we're all involved in this, and they have obviously got copies of these drawings as well. So going forward, time permitting, so collaboration is absolutely critical. What I should have said as well was that with the Kumasi projects, particularly, we were able to enlist Ghana into what's called Docomomo, which is the documentation of modern movement buildings. So Ghana has been the first sub-Saharan African country in its own right to join Docomomo, which is a kind of offshoot of UNESCO, United Nations Education and Social Cultural Organization. So these are some of the Docomomo team with, to my right, the fair lady in the right is from the University of Cape Town. And the person behind is actually from India, but he actually did a tour of Ghana as part of his master's project. So this idea about international collaborations becomes critical to the way in which we look at developing this as a further strain of research and also information. Same thing to the right, the KNUST Rexford Asasiapong, as the international officer, came to Manchester School of Architecture, and we're actively looking at an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, where we look at research and further documentation. It goes both ways. Here we are in Ghana, where we're looking at a project that involved both Ghanaian students again and Manchester School of Architecture students. And in this case, in the middle, we have Victoria Okoye, who is actually a PhD student. She's from Nigeria, but she's doing her PhD in Sheffield. And to her left, we have Irene Apianing Apong, who's also from the University of Ghana. So it really has become a kind of transnational venture where we work with a number of staff and students across the board. These are our students. The students were involved in writing workshops, but also in terms of working on exhibitions together. To the right, we have the former mayor of Accra, who was also involved in talking about the history of modern Accra to these students. So we're both involving the community and also younger students and those who are interested, who are now international. It's not just the local students. And so what are the challenges and opportunities? And this is where I sort of go into the reflective mode. Well, part of it is that the old way in which we looked at conservation, particularly, I guess, in terms of buildings, it's a bit like the museum view. You have the anthropologist, you have the archaeologist, and it all happens in a very specified area. And generally the knowledge is from the north to the south. So, you'd be sent off to do a degree in anthropology in Oxford or whatever. Nowadays, we're looking much more at a collaborative approach. As I said, we've had collaborations with the KNUST, University of Ghana. This is the Department of Architecture at the University of Lagos. And what we have done is to try and also encourage South-South collaboration. So we've had students from the University of Lagos get involved in writing workshops at the University of Ghana. And we're thinking about a future one where the University of Ghana students come over to the University of Lagos. We also work a lot with communities. So in terms of the other slide, a lot of the discussions we have are around having elders from local communities or who have been involved, who also work with us. So we don't just have the physical drawings of the buildings that we're interested in conserving. We're able to capture the histories, the oral histories and so on, which again, we know that those who are part of the community are much better knowing about and are much better able to relate to us. So the idea again is that the project has research, it has teaching, but it's also got a lot of community involvement. Part of that again is back to the idea about how do we conserve history and culture. We are not in the position I guess, Western countries to be able to say, right, this is a building, it's fantastic, we're going to create a museum out of it and you pay to come into it. We have to think about heritage as being living. We have to think about it as being part of the community. Therefore, we have to engage the community in what we do in terms of our understanding of it, and also our ways of making it a profitable thing to continue to look after and to develop. So the idea is about, in the case of Ghana, for example, we worked a lot with Archaeafrica and the Archaeafrica Cafe, which is in a downtown, I'll just go back to that, which is the diagram, the drawing, the photograph to the left, it's in a town part of Accra in Jamestown, which was really becoming derelict, but the Archaeafrica team were able to renovate it. It's now a place where people, well, in our case, we commandeered it for our workshop, our writing workshop, where people go there for events, for music, indeed for the talks that we had from the former mayor of Accra. So buildings cannot just be static. They have to be part of a community that owns the building and therefore finds uses that are practical for the buildings. So that's a very important part of the way in which we look at, I would say, conserving and dealing with our architecture, particularly the more recent heritage, which anyway is very much still being used by people. So that idea about getting the buildings to be more than just the icons, but being part of a locally owned and looked after heritage is absolutely critical to our understanding of how we deal with buildings. And really, to summarize, we think that this is important because there is going to be a next generation. What we're trying to do is to put together the tools. I don't like the word capacity building per se, because I think we all have capacity, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that the next generation are in a position where they can understand, appreciate, and also, I would say, publicize their heritage. So this last photograph is at the end of our writing workshop, actually 2 years ago, and we have a range of students and indeed mentors and teachers who've all been involved in what was 2 weeks of writing about the history, about contemporary buildings in Accra in 2018. And I think this is where I'm going to end the talk. Thank you.
But you are muted. You're muted, Watu.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ola, for that great presentation. You've given us a lot of food for thought. And thank you for highlighting that we all already have quite a lot of capacity, even if that might not always be recognized. And definitely, we'll be wanting to ask you a lot of questions. I'll just remind the audience, if you have questions for Ola, do remember to post them in the chat so that we can put them to her as soon as Gordon has given his talk. Now we shall move on to Gordon's talk, and it's titled Building and Sustaining a Conducive Ecosystem for Globally Competitive Research in African Universities. Gordon, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be on the Insaka talk today. I've been following AfOx activities for a while, and so I'm happy to be here today. Apologies to Ola, who doesn't like the word capacity building. I'm going to talk a lot about capacity building, so sorry about that. Anyway, so my talk is going to talk about the progress that we've made in Africa in terms of building capacity for research, and in particular for biomedical research, which is the focus of the work that I do. In Africa, most of the high-level research historically is usually done in institutes and research institutes and research centers that are located outside the universities. The universities have traditionally had weak infrastructure for research. And most universities are actually focused on teaching and undergraduate education rather than research. But the irony is that the university is actually the best place for us to build capacity for research on a sustainable basis, because we can combine teaching, research, and innovation in one place. The challenge mainly has been the lack of investment in science on the continent. We all know that several years ago, African leaders pledged to spend at least 1% of their GDP on research. And we also know that less than 10 countries have actually done that. Most of them have not made any progress in that direction. However, the landscape has changed significantly over the last 10, 15 years. And that's largely due to major capacity building initiatives, mostly coming out of, coming from outside the continent. And the difference has been that some of these initiatives have favored Africa-led projects where the PI is supposed to be from Africa, where the funding goes directly into African universities, and where a substantial amount of funding goes into a model unit or a center of excellence, which can then be used as a launch pad to transform universities. And I've listed some of the major initiatives that have made an impact in this direction: the World Bank African Center of Excellence, the Delta's Africa program, H3 Africa, and then more recently the Arua initiative, which has also launched African Centers of Excellence. So Workbench is a center of excellence at the University of Ghana. We started in 2014, and basically we are an example of the impact that these initiatives I've mentioned have made, because we have shamelessly taken advantage of nearly all those initiatives. So we started as a World Bank Center of Excellence. We also won one of the Delta's grants, and we are part of several H3 Africa programs. So we set out to establish a hub for biomedical research in West Africa with the sole aim of building capacity to be able to provide local training that would groom the next generation of African science leaders. And since 2014, we've provided training opportunities, long-term training opportunities, master's, PhD, postdoctoral, fellowships to 246 scientists from about 13 countries. On the map, you can see most of it is in West Africa, but we have people as far away as East Africa and Southern Africa. So the majority of this has been anchored by a research program. And so we have produced more than 200 quality publications, which are led by these trainees, and that is one of our strategies for building building their capacity. So I'm going to highlight a few things that I think have helped us make an impact. And the first one is institutional commitment. A center of excellence in a university environment cannot succeed without commitment from the university. This is unique from a situation where you have an independent research institute, which is not under any university bureaucracy. So for a center of excellence in this peculiar environment of an African university, which is not normally set up for high intensive research, you need the institution to commit to provide the independence for the center to be able to operate. So one of the things that have to be created, and what we have been able to do, is to the university provided us with a clear governance structure that allows me as the director of the center to report directly to the provost, and I don't need to pass through a head of department or a dean. That allows me to be more independent and take decisions and be able to be innovative in the way that I manage the center and I drive the activities of the center. Another thing is that in university finances, it's difficult to follow the money. So it's very important that a center such as ours has a different account that allows you to keep track of your money, and for donors to be confident that when they send money, the money would not get lost in the big university pool of funds. And then you need a support system, a staff support system. So what we've done is set up a parallel system They've done interfaces with the university. And so our staff do most of the work, and the university administrators just have to look and approve. And that gets things done much quicker than normal. Then a center of excellence must look like one. So we had to invest a lot of our resources to make the environment look world-class, buy key equipment, put up a building that provides world-class facilities, as some of the pictures I've shown here. And that was necessary to create the necessary environment that will allow high quality science to take place. And then we had to do the actual science. So we had to focus clearly on delivering scientific results. And so we focus mainly on basic science research using molecular and cellular approaches to understand disease mechanisms, and then looking at how we can exploit such information for diagnosis, vaccines, and drugs. So we started with infectious diseases, but then with deltas, we started to do some human genetics, and that has led us to do some non-communicable disease research. So, anchoring the program in a strong research culture is very important for success. Building partnerships. I think Ola already talked about this very well, that in a research environment, you need to have strong partnerships from all over, starting within the institution, within the University of Ghana, within Ghana, and then within Africa, and then globally. So we have, several faculty members across the world who contribute to our program. And, this helps to strengthen our scientific quality, and also gives us an opportunity for our students to travel to labs in different parts of the world and get a different experience. And we also have been very specific about engaging Africans in the diaspora and trying to see how we can leverage their expertise, and also try to actually convince some of them to come home. Then synergizing funding. So we as a center of excellence, we've had to develop a full pipeline of training from graduate internships to master's, PhD, postdoctoral, and then senior fellowships. And so we had to leverage specific funding for specific targeted programs at the center. And that's what we've been able to do, and get the buy-in of several funders to support different levels of training, and provide opportunities for our trainees to climb up the ladder. Related to our engagement with diaspora is that we also specifically targeted young African scientists who did their PhDs abroad or were doing a postdoc abroad, to try to convince them to come back home. We help them to write grants, and through those fellowships, they have relocated. So we've been able to successfully bring several of such people who are now back here and being integrated into the university system or into other research institutions. And this also helps strengthen our training and research at the center, and also reverses the brain drain, one bit at a time. So what I've described is just a snapshot of what we are doing at our center. There are many other centers across the continent who are doing the same thing or better. And even within the University of Ghana, we have other centers: West Africa Center for Crop Improvement. We have the Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research, and then there's a new center called West Africa Genomic Medicine Center. There are several others in other universities. I have colleagues in University of KwaZulu-Natal, Redeemers University, MRTC in Mali, Cape Town. Several other universities are using these models to build research capacity and to create a model system within the university. In addition to that, there are several other centers of excellence that are located outside universities, which all add together to basically drive us towards the critical mass that we need to get to where, the type of Africa that we want. However, there are critical steps that need to be taken now to consolidate these gains. So I'll quickly go through some of them, and then we can discuss further during the discussion. First thing is commitment from government. I already talked about the 1% GDP pledge, which has not yet been, satisfied. But we have to give some African governments credit. For example, the World Bank training program, or the World Bank African Center of Excellence program, is actually a loan facility to those governments that are participating. So the governments have to sign up that when a university in their countries won this grant, the grant will be given to the university, but the amount will be charged to the government debt. And so African governments had to commit to basically take over these grants as loans. And I think we need to give credit for that. And we hope that that will continue. They've also been subsidizing university expenditures, the salaries of faculty and utility bills. These are things that the government pays most of. And I think that is something that they'll continue to do. One thing they need to do is to, revise policies to make, to promote a more research-friendly environment, such as procurement, taxes on reagents, and, generally just facilitating the work of scientists. There's a lot that can be done in that direction. At the institutional level, we need to also modernize the institutional structures to also support, procurement for reagents and equipment, working in tandem with what the government is going to do. Formalizing a postdoc position or, creating research position. Most universities do not have research-specific position. Everything is about teaching, and the ladder is about teaching and growing in a teaching, hierarchy. And so we need to shift that and start creating research-intensive positions where people can focus more on research and less on teaching. Also relaxing the university bureaucracy, allowing more interdisciplinary research where departments are not barriers to good ideas, and then allowing the faculty to work across different departments. Graduate enrollment is critical for research. Research is mostly driven by graduate students, all over the world. Master's students, PhD students, postdocs, they drive research. Unfortunately, some African universities have taken the wrong approach of charging high fees for graduate students, which then is counterproductive because it leads to you enrolling only those who can pay, and they are not always the best students. And then you end up losing some of our best students, to universities outside, because that's where they get fellowships to go. So we need to rather focus on grantsmanship and bringing grants that can then provide fellowships to graduate students, and then we can attract the best students and retain our best scientists on the continent. So that's related to promoting a grantsmanship culture. Young faculty need to be specifically encouraged to write grants and get into that culture of competing for grants on a regular basis. And then we need to find ways of incentivizing people who are research intensive in terms of the criteria for promotion and leadership appointments in the university. And then also financial rewards. Most African universities, the salary is very, very poor, and many people cannot survive, and you cannot attract the best brains that way. And then at the institutional level, you need to choose research-intensive leaders. If you want to be a research-intensive university, you have to have leaders who have that research-intensive mindset, and because the decisions they take are guided by their own personal experiences and their understanding of how research is run. So we need people who have walked their walk and talked their talk and can really take the best decisions to promote research. Research is moving into a computerized stage, and African universities need to stay abreast with that. So we need to make sure that internet connectivity, high-speed internet is a given in all universities. We need to invest in high computing capacity to allow informatics and artificial intelligence and such computing based research to be done. And then one other thing to optimize our equipment use is to set up research cores. There are many institutions where you have big equipment, several big equipment sitting in the same university. You have 4 sequences in one university, all of them being underutilized and paying high cost of maintenance. If we develop this into cores like the advanced universities do, then you are able to maintain the equipment better, and then you save cost and also extend the life of this equipment. This is my last slide. My experience is that women have a lot to offer, and those of us in the basic science, we often don't have as many women involved as we would like. So one of the things we need to do is to take deliberate steps to unleash the talent and leadership qualities of women. From my experience, women are more focused, they have greater tenacity, they provide better performance, and generally they bring a great value to the leadership of research institutions. And we really need to create an environment that allows them to flourish, and so that we can benefit from their talent. Mentorship is a huge problem in African universities. There are many young people who just need direction, and institutions need to make deliberate efforts to make sure that there are mentors available to these young academics, either from within the institution or from partner institutions where the expertise exists. Private sector, most parts of Africa, private sector is basically non-existent. We need government to put incentives in place for people to invest in, R&D. There are so many, industries that just produce. They don't do research. They just take a formula and start making, a product, and there's no research and development for that. And we need to partner with these type of private sector institutions. Finally, we have to deal with the issue of intra-African mobility. It's so difficult to travel within the continent, and it's so expensive. Sometimes it's more difficult for me to go from Ghana to Cameroon than to go from Ghana to the UK. Or it's really something that inhibits our ability to collaborate and to optimize our strengths. And so we need political leaders, whilst committing 1% of their GDP to research. Also put in mechanisms to break down the barriers and allow travel to be better, and that way we can truly be one continent that can optimize our strengths. I want to leave you with this. I think that the transformation that's going on, we see evidence that it's being well received. A lot of young people are enthusiastic, and they are really looking for an opportunity. This is a map of applications we received last year when we advertised for 10 PhD fellowships. We had over 500 applications from across the continent, as you can see. And many of these were very well qualified students who are just looking for a chance. And so, whilst we encourage them to take up science, we need to provide opportunities for them so that we don't lose them and have them leave the continent. African governments need to step up and do some of the things that we've just discussed. The private sector needs to step in and provide opportunities for these guys. We're training a lot of people, masters, PhD. They cannot all remain in the universities. They need to be able to have, private sector institutions that they can work in. So I just want to end by thanking our people. We have a big, setup here with, staff at all levels supporting what we do, and across the continent as well. And then finally, our many, many funders who make sure that we have the funds to keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon, for what I think is certainly a very awe-inspiring presentation, especially in terms of the achievements of the center so far, and considering that it was only set up about 7 years ago. So quite a lot of thinking that has gone there around the type of models that are workable for today, really, and the different approaches that you're boldly going ahead with to ensure that a conducive research ecosystem is achieved. So we'll now go straight into questions. I can see there's quite a few that have come in. I'm going to start with a question for Ola. And there's someone who's asking, what for you are the most significant benefits of collaborating with African partners, and what makes for fruitful and ethical partnerships?
Microphone.
Right. So what are the key elements? Well, I think they go together. I mean, to have a proper partnership, we do need to look at ourselves as equals. So the idea that we have the kind of European savior, I won't use the word white savior, is wrong. we are both on a journey. We're learning together. I think particularly in the social sciences, maybe with the science proper that Gordon has been talking about, there is possibly that tilts towards their having a lot of the technology and some of the things. But certainly in social science, the chances are that a lot of the information that we're trying to find out is very much located in the partnership country from the South. And the idea about sort of, as they call it, the helicopter situation where one comes in, takes out the information, then goes out to publish a paper is outdated and antiquated. What we're looking at now is much more the model called co-creation and collaboration. So to have a very fruitful partnership, it means that we can balance what we do. I think with travel, it's interesting now that we're in this COVID or post-COVID environment, but in the past, fair enough, it might be easier for me to travel to West Africa. But nowadays, very much, if I was doing a project, I would be going to West Africa. I wouldn't be saying, well, here are 3 scholarships or whatever, please come to and meet me in Manchester. It's very much an equality in terms of where we actually are able to sit down, meet and collaborate, but also in terms of the material we're dealing with, because the material is very much owned by the areas we're interested in. So in my case, the architecture is there in Africa. It would be unfair for me to say, okay, I'll just take photographs, then I'll work with you from my office in Manchester. I mean, it's very much being part of that discussion, working with people in the settings that they're in, and also, well, back to the word capacity building, also working with people to develop the strengths they have in actually understanding their culture. So it's very much having that link where there's an equality of knowledge, and there should be an equality of both research, sharing, and then disseminating. So at all these levels, we're trying to make sure that we're working at par, or if there is a disparity, we try and iron out that disparity where it is possible. So for younger researchers and so on, I keep saying that you have to know your own history and write your own history, because otherwise people will write your history for you. So in an equal situation, this is what I'm doing. It's a bit like, I guess, indeed, a very successful aid program is a program where you're not needed. The legacy should be that architects, architecture students, architectural historians in West Africa, in this case, are able to take control of their history and be able to discuss this and also publish it across the world. So it's a very supportive function, but it's a function where we work together.
Thank you for that, Ola. And this question on partnerships and collaboration has come up quite a few times. I've counted about 5, 6, or 7 times. And it's also been put to Gordon as well. So it would be interesting to hear your views. I know you covered a lot of that in your talk, and Ola has pointed out, has pointed a number of things, including one that is specifically wanting to know, what role do you see for international partnerships outside the continent going forward? So your take on partnerships, Gordon.
Yes, indeed, we have really benefited tremendously from partnerships, both within the continent and outside. And I think what partnerships do, is that it brings complementary strengths. So you usually get together with people who share your vision, but who bring, complementary expertise, access to additional resources, access to facilities, and, just value in terms of the intellectual discussion that you have in terms of the research questions that we are building, and generally just making the world a better place, that we can all work together, across the world and solve common problems. So I think that I'm a big believer in partnerships, both local and international.
And do you see them taking a different form in the future, or are they likely to carry on looking similar to what we are seeing today?
Well, I think it's evolving as we build capacity on the continent. What we require from partnerships also evolve. It's now a case where we are bringing more to the table than before, and that sort of reshapes the kind of partnerships that we build. it's not a situation of we always be on the receiving side of international partnerships. Now there are many situations where we are actually the source of value to international partners. So I think that is changing and reshaping the dynamics of these partnerships.
Thank you. We'll most likely come back to that because there are more questions that are popping up around that, but I just want to shift onto something different. Ola, you spoke eloquently about traditional and modernist architecture. Could you tell us a little bit about contemporary architectural design in Africa?
Okay, that would have been a totally different lecture. But yes, there is now the contemporary. We have indeed a Ghanaian, Sir David Ajayi, who's one of the star architects in the world today. Again, in the chronological scheme of things, the modern movement kind of ends somewhere in the 70s, maybe early 80s. And what we've had since then is a movement which has become in some ways much more international, but has increasingly, we would say, a regional flavor. So in the case of, for example, if I commented on David Ajayi's work, it does actually take on cultural references. So he's done very big projects in the West. So this is the idea about the international anyway, like the Museum of African Heritage in America, Washington. But also he's become very involved in actually doing quite a lot of design in West Africa. And there's a Marmite view. Some people love it, some people hate it, but he's doing a lot of work. I know he's doing the possible future national church in Accra. In Nigeria, he's done the design for a new concept store. So this is a kind of contemporary take. The modernist movement was very much founded, again, mainly in Europe, the whole Bauhaus thing about us all being democratic and the idea about buildings, which actually would be better for COVID. But anyway, we're in the contemporary where we look much more at the local influences that influence the ways in which we design. Another example would be the Echo Bank in Accra, which again, an interesting partnership. The architects are both Ghanaian and South African, but it's got a very specific viewpoint. It's got a screen print of Africa on the front, and it has a very strategic location. So there are these ideas about the contemporary way in which we interpret architecture. The other person will be, of course, Kere in Burkina Faso, who's done some very interesting work with mud in terms of new forms of schools that are very relevant to his part of, if you like, the northern part of West Africa. So there's the beginning of a burgeoning set of architects who are designing in a contemporary way for Africa.
All right, thank you. Gordon, there are sort of in-country specific questions here about the government and about the institutions. So of course you spoke about the importance of institutional commitment, the importance of government buy-in and all the rest of it. And there's someone who is saying that this is, having government commitment is usually very difficult. Have you had any successes? That's one question. And the related one is, if centers have to operate autonomously from the university to be successful, does this mean that the university is not fit for research excellence?
All right, those are excellent questions. First, government commitment. Well, I would say yes and no. So we've made some progress in the sense that in Ghana, now there's a bill before the parliament for the establishment of a National Research and Innovation Fund. So that's good progress. We've been talking about this for 20 years or so. And now there's a bill, it's in parliament. Now, the bad news is that it's been in parliament for 2 years. And so I've been really talking about this and speaking out against the fact that this has been sitting in parliament. Other bills go to parliament and they get passed within a matter of weeks or months. This one has been sitting there for 2 years, and in fact, we're in the third year now. And so, yes, we made progress by, getting some attention and putting some focus on it. But on the other hand, we need to push more. I also mentioned the issue about the World Bank project. That is something we need to give government credit for, because in Ghana, we are now in the second phase of the World Bank project. So that means that they had to commit additional resources. As I mentioned, this is a loan scheme, actually. So I win the grant. The money comes to the University of Ghana for us to do research. but they charge the bill to the government as a debt. They add it to the government's debt to the World Bank. So the government has to agree to do this. They have to agree to absorb this debt. So we have to give them credit that they absorbed the first one, which we had in 2014, and they just absorbed another one, which we had last year. So that is something that we ought to give them credit for. Now we just need to, ring fence some money for research, which is by establishing this research fund that will have a stream of funding going to it. And I think other international partners may even contribute to it if we do it properly, and then it can grow. I think that's what we need in terms of the next stage of the commitment. Number two, about the semi-autonomy in the university. Well, the fact of the matter is that African universities traditionally are positioned to teach and to focus on undergraduate education. That's just a matter of development, because that's the priority. A lot of people are trying to get a first degree. So that's where a lot of the focus has been. And most of the big universities are government-funded universities, which means that the same issue about funding comes in. Research is expensive, especially the type of research we do, which is basic science research. It's extremely expensive, and you need a lot of investment to provide the necessary infrastructure for the research to be done. And this has not happened. This has not happened yet. And that's why the concept of creating, ecosystems within the university where you can have a sort of a bubble where you have research excellence. You insulate yourself from the bigger university and try to create something within, and then you can then try to spread the impact across the university. That's basically the model that is working right now, both in the University of Ghana and in other universities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you made the point that it's important to find people or attract people who have a strong interest of research and are able to drive a research agenda. And there's a question here that it would be remiss of me not to ask it, because I think it's a very good question. There's someone who is asking, what advice would you give a PhD student who is looking to open a center of excellence in his country? Where does he start or she start?
Well, where you start is to learn how to write grants and learn how to lead research. So if you don't have any experience of doing that, you first have to find a position that would give you the training, the hands-on training of building a research group and raising funds in terms of writing competitive grants, because you cannot build a center of excellence with nothing. So, and funds are difficult to come by. The government is not going to give you, enough resources to do this. So you have to compete for funding, which means you have to equip yourself with the skills to be able to compete for funding. And that means that you have to train yourself. So if you are a new, I would suggest that you find a center of excellence and go and work there and understudy how a center of excellence works and equip yourself with the skills and the experience to be able to then set up your own.
Thank you for that. Ola, I would be very interested to hear more about the history that comes out of architecture. Actually, there's someone who would like to know if you can tell us about architecture and the history that it provides and the contemporary reality. But importantly, I know you mentioned about the living heritage and the fact that in your work you speak to, you collaborate with local elders, you want to record the oral histories, etc. I think this is an extension of that, where they're really wanting to know where the history lies, because in many African cultures, I'm aware that the way to conserve history and heritage was done a little bit differently. There were experts, and these experts were not necessarily people with a PhD in anthropology or some university degree. There were people who were born to conserve the history, and they hold all these oral information around the heritage. So could you tell us a little bit about history and architecture?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I mean, I think it's the issue about the symbols and the artifacts. And it's a very interesting discussion, because I think what we don't want to do is to get into this discussion about tangible and intangible heritage, where the tangible heritage is the built. So because Africa doesn't have that many buildings, therefore a lot of our heritage is oral and indeed embodied in the people. But I think there's more than just the building. Often there's the building, there's the place. Again, because I'm in a Ghanaian mode at the moment, I can think about areas around Jamestown that are important because this was a place where Kwame Nkrumah and his party had meetings and events. So the buildings become secondary, but the events that took place there are very important. Now, if we take that into our understanding of the histories of architecture and so on, for most countries, particularly the colonized, which is everywhere in Africa apart from Ethiopia and maybe Liberia, not Liberia, yeah. The idea is that there are buildings that have, or there are spaces and places which generally have buildings on them that embody this history. And do we actually take into account this? And this is not just the archaeology, it's actually the lived heritage of these buildings, particularly when we think about Africa, where generally we don't have the buildings that have stayed in the same, or we don't have buildings that are 100 years old, although of course you can think about Greater Zimbabwe and some other very specific archaeological remains. But what we do have is a heritage where the spaces and places where things happen are part of a longer narrative. So we have this dichotomy where in some ways we're like America and places, or Japan, where buildings change every 25 years. But what they do in these countries is they often have a very good understanding of their history and their heritage. In Africa, the problem we have is that apart from the traditional anthropological archaeology, a lot of the, if you like, the contemporary, where we live on a day-to-day basis, that changes very fast. Lagos is a good example. In my lifetime, I'm quite old, Lagos has changed probably 3 or 4 times. There have been a series of buildings that have been built on top of, or rather the building is built, 20 years later, a developer decides I'm building something else. You haven't recorded what you've built before, we've moved into another. And then because of the price of real estate, the people who actually lived on the land have gone somewhere else. So there's no real history around the buildings that are there, or even the space or the place. What we're trying to do with, I guess, the conservation of modern architecture or contemporary architecture is think about what those spaces were, try and find out the people who've been or lived there over the last 20, 50 years or whatever, and then also record. Because again, we accept that because we're still in a developmental stage, most of Africa, these buildings might not stay forever, but we have a record of them. So there's that link between the record and also those who have the histories around that, the oral histories and so on, particularly in coastal communities where these histories are sometimes hundreds of years old. And they relate to the place, the names, you know, that again may have been forgotten. So it's more than just the building, but the buildings are often signifiers if they still exist. And that's why it's so important to record them.
Thank you. I'm aware that you're drawing very close to the end of this session, but you know, because of the very many questions around collaboration, etc., I'm going to ask you to give, you know, a few more words, if you may, around collaboration and possibly touching on intra-African collaboration as well. Ola, you can go ahead if you'd like to go first.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think it's absolutely critical. One other thing I'm doing in Manchester, which is interesting, is the 75th anniversary of the holding of the Pan-African Congress in Manchester in 1945. And literally all the leaders who are then going to become presidents of Africa, so Nkrumah, Azikiwe, Banda from Malawi, the writer Peter Abrahams, they were all in Manchester at the time. And the idea was that Africa is Pan-African and we should collaborate and ask for independence. And pretty much all those leaders, I guess, apart from South Africa, which was in a different area, went on to talk together, and they went on to gain independence for their countries. I think Africa needs to have these collaborations and partnerships. Certainly in my experience, I feel very comfortable, actually, whether in Ghana, sometimes in South Africa, but we have shared experiences that actually, I think we can actually talk about, and that makes us stronger. The North-South partnerships are also important, but I think particularly the intra-African partnerships are particularly vital, because if you like, we sweat the same sweat. We are suffering some of the same problems, but also culturally, we know that, again, historically, Africa, or the countries of Africa, a lot of them are constructed. They're as old as the Berlin Conference. So regionally, we have a lot in common. And I would say educationally as well, when we take away the language barriers, as Gordon has pointed out, there are things that we can learn that are very important to, I think, particularly developing our own educational strength from undergraduate right up to postgraduate and PhD level. And this will only happen through collaboration. I would actually push again for regional collaborations as well. So we actually are able to do that. I mean, it's interesting, Nigeria is large, but I think in many ways, Ghana leads in the ways in which it collaborates. We need this collaboration to actually develop the next generation. And again, as Gordon has said, that brings value to the collaborations we have, because we have to, again, develop our own manpower and capacity and open it up across the board. So again, some of the things that we take for granted about female access and so on, we're able to spread that across. And this, indeed, as he said, the driving spirit towards, can I lead a research group and so on, that is something that we look at. And that's very important for us to see within Africa and in terms of our understandings of what we can do together. So it's absolutely critical.
Thank you. Gordon, one last word, please.
Yeah, I think Ola has made most of the points, but from a science, basic science point of view, as I mentioned, one of the critical issues is about sharing resources and access to equipment and facilities. Because we have to prioritize our resources, it's very important that we share access to facilities. As I mentioned, we don't need to have a sequencer in every institution. We don't need to have a mass spec in every institution. If the travel becomes better, I can have a student take samples from here and get on a train and go to Nigeria, analyze them, and come back the next day. So that collaboration is really important for us to optimize our resources and to share ideas. Our problems are pretty much the same across the continent. So why not put our brains together, our resources together, our energies together, and let's solve the problems together. So I really think that intra-African collaboration is really critical, and it's very positive that we're seeing an increase in the level of intra-African collaboration, thanks to some of these initiatives that I've talked about, Deltas and World Bank Centers of Excellence, intra-Africa. All these things have promoted collaboration between African scientists.
We've come to the end of our session today. Thank you very much. That will be all from us today. Thank you to our speakers and thank you to the audience. And we shall look forward to seeing you again next month. And it's goodbye from AfOx. Thank you.